All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's Google Search Central SEO Office Hour Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I'm a search advocate here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what we do are these office hour sessions where people can jump in and ask their questions around web search and their websites. And we can try to find an answer. Looks like I don't know, a bunch of people already submitted questions, so we have some of that to go through. But we can also go through some of the live questions first. It looks like a handful of you have your hands raised, so let me see. Let's start off with David.
Hi, John. I'm an SEO manager for a news publisher in Germany, and we have a huge, complex robots TXT, like with more than 1,500 lines, with a multitude of disallows that has grown steadily over the years. And the disallows often refer to HTML fragments and URLs where AJAX calls are used, and where it is not possible to set a no index tag. So my question is, or I have several questions about this. Are there any negative SEO effects that can result from a very huge robots TXT?
I mean, not direct negative SEO issues with that, but it makes it a lot harder to maintain. And it makes it a lot easier to accidentally push something that does cause issues. So just because it's a large file doesn't mean it's a problem, but it makes it easier for you to create problems.
Okay, I understand that. Okay. And are there any negative SEO effects if we don't include the sitemap into the robots TXT?
No, that's
Okay.
like those different ways of submitting the sitemap are all equivalent for us.
Okay. Third question. What would be the SEO effect if we radically shorten the robots TXT? For example, set everything to allow. Does Google recognize non-user relevant HTML fragments, or do they end up in the index? And how does Google deal with pages where AJAX calls are used?
So it's hard to say what you mean with regards to those fragments. Like
Like
are
it's
the like
like a header or a footer element. They are disallowed because they're not interesting for the user. Like it's a big custom made content management system. Yes, with a lot of like these HTML fragments.
and how like are these fragments that you use in the CMS to construct the page, or are they kind of referenced within the page itself, like with JavaScript files and things like that?
I think both of these. Yeah, like
Yeah.
they used to build the page, and also yeah, for JavaScript.
I so my thought there would be to try to figure out exactly how these fragment URLs are used. And if you're unsure, maybe take one of these fragment URLs and allow its crawling, and look at the content of that fragment URL, and then check to see what happens in search.
Okay.
Does it affect anything with regards to the index content on your site? Is that some of that content findable within your site suddenly? Is that a problem or not? And try to work based on that. Because it's very easy to block things by Robotstxt, which actually are not used for indexing. And then you spend a lot of time maintaining this big Robotstxt file, but it actually doesn't change that much for your website.
Okay. And is there, apart from radically shortening in it, is there any kind of a guideline for the robots text? How do you build it? No.
No. It's essentially up to you. Like some sites have big files, some sites have small files. Like they should all just work. We have an open source code of the Robotstxt parser that we use. So what you can also do is get your developers to run that parser for you, or kind of set it up so that you can test it, and then check the URLs on your website with that parser to see which URLs would actually get blocked and what that would change. And that way, you can test things before you make them.
Okay. And where can I find this parser?
It's on GitHub. I think it's linked from our Robotstxt documentation as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So one additional questions about web stories. So I want to know, is there any timeline when web stories for Google Search and Google Discover are available in Germany?
I don't know. So I mean, these things usually start off in some countries or languages, and then they go everywhere. But I don't know what the timing is.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Oh, sure. Ahmed.
Hi, John. So my question for this week is actually about heading tags. Some SEOs say that they do not affect your rankings, and some of them say the only thing that matters for your ranking is just their size, like H1 should be bigger than H2 than H3, for example. But when I analyzed your own blog and Google Search Central documentations, I saw that you and Google use heading tags properly. Like you use only one H1 tag per page, and there's a hierarchy between these heading tags. And also Google Chrome Lighthouse has a warning when you do not use heading tags hierarchical, it says you should use them hierarchical. So should we use heading tags like you and Google use, or can we just use them randomly? Can I just add, for example, 5 H1 tags to a page?
So I think, first of all, you should not assume that just because Google does something that it's the best way to do it. Across all of our sites, there are people with various level of kind of search SEO-related knowledge. And not everyone focuses on all of the details and does it all perfectly. So I would kind of like say, well, Google does this, but it doesn't mean that it's perfect. And the same for any other big website. It's like so many people are always involved with these big websites. You can't assume that everything they do is perfect, even if they rank #1 for some of these queries. So that's kind of my first thing. With regards to headings, we do use them to understand a little bit better what the context is of individual pieces of content. And for that, it can help if you have a kind of a hierarchy on the page. But I think almost the bigger effect that you would see is with regards to usability, that especially people with screen readers or other kind of assistive devices, they rely on these headings to better understand the page and kind of know where within the page they need to go. And because of that, it's something where I would say, well, if you're going to work on headings on your pages, you might as well do it right. And often it doesn't take a lot of extra work to kind of like figure out how to do the hierarchy right and set up the templates for that. So my recommendation would be to do the headings right, but it's not something where I'd say you're required to do it.
OK, thank you for your answer. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Let's see, Saket.
Yeah, hi, John. Hope
Hi.
you're doing well. I'm Saket from CED Commerce from India. We provide affordable solutions for e-commerce, digital marketing, and global marketplace requirements. So we are planning to move our one product category of multi-vendor on a new domain or subdomain. So we want to know that how we move forward in this planning and how do we implement it and what obstacles we are going to face and what are the solutions, how to rank the new domain because current domain ranks well on Google and other search engines and provide us good organic search traffic, and how much time it will take to make the new domain to receive the amount of traffic we are receiving now.
I don't think there is any fixed time for that kind of change, because it sounds like you're not just moving from one domain to another. You're actually moving to one infrastructure to a different infrastructure. And often
Yes.
that means the content will be different. The structure of the pages, maybe even the URLs will be different. All of that can change. And all of
Yes.
these things are elements which take time to be processed. And it really depends on the website with regards to how long that would take. And it's not that you can have a specific timeline for that. And I think the other part to also keep in mind is these kind of changes can have overall positive or negative effects for a website. So it's very possible to take this kind of a migration and say, we will also work on SEO and improve the interlinking of our pages and the URL structure and the HTML format of our pages. And all of these can have very positive effects for your website. But at the same time, if you don't watch out for these things, and suddenly you have a big mess of URLs, and the HTML is not easily understandable by search engines, then that can have a negative effect. So it's something where you shouldn't assume that if you're migrating like an e-commerce shop from one platform to another, that it will be the same on the other platform after a certain period of time. It can be similar. It can be much better. It can also be much worse. So you really need to watch out for all of those details and think about what is the final structure that you want, and what kind of SEO elements do you want to include with that migration.
Okay, and what kind of negative aspects we will face when we are going to moving that infrastructure to a new domain?
It's really hard to say, because it depends on all of the details of what you actually change. Usually, what happens in a situation when everything is very, very well lined up, you will see some fluctuations over the time when we learn about the new website to when we shift everything over. And that's something where I would assume you will see some less visibility in search. But it really depends on all of the changes that you make along there, where it can take a lot longer, or it can also be something where the final result is much worse or even much better than it was before.
Okay, if you allow me, I'll share some data with you regarding the product we are going to move to a new domain. Basically, the product is 6 to 7 years old, and there is multiple add-ons and extensions related to that product. We have 200 plus blogs, 10K plus backlinks, and we have multiple partnerships with leading brands in this industry related to that product. And the competition is also too strong for that product on search engines.
I think it's really hard to say offhand. So what I would recommend doing, if you feel like you have no idea which direction even to check, I would take these details and post them in the Webmaster Help forums and try to get some advice from other people. And usually they can quickly tell you, like, oh, it looks like you're moving from this well-known platform to another well-known platform, and that's no problem. Or you can just do this extra step, and everything will be the same. But it's really something where someone needs to look at those details. And usually that's best done in a kind of like a help forum, where you can post all of the URLs and some of the queries that you're looking at.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Sure. Let's see, Gal.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I'm in SEO, and I was given this question, and I want to provide the best possible answer. I've got a client that operates in only a handful of states. And right now, when you go to the homepage, the state that they're headquartered in is loud and clear. You know that they're in that state. But then they feel like it's leaving the other states out when they come to the page. So the conversion team has an idea to create state landing pages, but they want to automatically redirect the user when they come to the home page to that state page. So a dynamic geo IP redirection. And then since those state pages are essentially the same home page, just with that state showcased better, their idea is to no index these state pages. And I now have a tight ball in my stomach about this whole idea. And they want to know the SEO implications of doing so.
OK. So I think there are a few things to kind of keep in mind there. On the one hand, Google for search, we generally just crawl from one location. And probably for most systems, that would map back to California. And essentially, what that would mean is that the content that we can look at would be the content for California. And we would not have access to the content for the other states, which, depending on what kind of content you have there for the other states, that might be OK, but it might be problematic. So that's kind of the first thing to keep in mind is probably it will look like when you search for your company, it'll look like, oh, this is purely in California, or maybe even in San Francisco. I don't know how the IP addresses would map there. So I think that's something that often throws people off, especially with geo IP redirects or dynamically swapping the content. The other thing is if you no-index the individual state landing pages, then, of course, the state landing page that someone from California would go to would also be no-indexed, which would basically mean that your home page would drop out of the search results. So that would be a pretty bad thing. My general recommendation for these kind of situations is instead of redirecting automatically to a specific location, to make it so that the user can find that content much easier. So something like a dynamic banner on a page. When the user goes to the home page, there's a banner on top that says, oh, it looks like you're in Texas, and we have an office in Texas, and here's the information, and click this link to find out more. And that way, the user has the kind of the ability to go to these individual pages. And ideally, those individual pages would also be indexable, because that way, if someone looks for your company name plus the state name, they would be able to find that landing page, which would be essentially ideal. The other approach that you could take is to swap out some of the content dynamically on the home page. So instead of having separate state landing pages, you have kind of your general home page, and you have that state-specific information dynamically swapped out. The important part here is to make sure that overall that home page still has enough generic content, so that it doesn't come across as everything is for California, but rather it's this is lots of information about your business. And since it looks like you're in California, here's specific information for California or whatever state that you're in. So those are generally the two directions that we recommend there. With regards to the individual state landing pages, for a handful of versions, we wouldn't really see that as being problematic. If you had landing pages for every city in every state, then that would start looking a little bit iffy for our web spam algorithms. But if you're talking about a handful of states, or I don't know, maybe even all states, it's something where you have 50 different versions of the homepage with your local address, with phone numbers, opening hours, kind of that additional local information on them. From our point of view, that's generally fine.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Gail, I think you can get also a lot of inspirations from a lot of affiliates in the space. You take a look at also Expedia, how they do it really well. But yeah, inspiration from that angle would really help you.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
You're
with some of the bigger sites that do this kind of automatically swapping out the content for location, you can also see that in the search results. And it used to be, I think if you search for Craigslist, the top pages from Craigslist were all California pages. And then it looked like, well, this is a California company, and it's not even relevant for me. And those are the kind of things that you want to watch out for, to make sure that the content that's indexed and findable in search kind of represents your business overall. And you additionally have that local information, but it doesn't drown out the general information for your business.
Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. All right, Hazel.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Hi.
So I've got 3 questions, and the first one is about the redirecting. Do you know what are the risks of redirecting users from site page to like app? Because does it have a negative impact on traffic from a SEO perspective?
I don't think so. So you mean if you register the URLs for the app, I think you do that in the operating system, so that if you go to that URL, it goes directly to the app? Like
Not
that?
exactly. It's more about because as we were doing the data analysis, we found that the bounce rate of our mobile is very high, and it also has low conversion rate. But our app has a more higher conversion rate. So we are thinking that maybe we can redirect some users when they got on some product pages or category pages. We redirect some users to app or app store. Maybe we can conversion these users to maybe contribute to a higher conversion.
Now, I think overall you can do that. The aspect I would generally watch out for there is that you do it in a way that lets users go to the app if they want to. So I don't know all of the details at the moment with regards to kind of the connection between the apps and the web pages. But I believe there is a way to do a kind of a smart banner where if you can recognize that the user has the app installed, it's very easy for them to kind of move to the app experience from there. But I don't know the specific details for like Android and iPhone, how that currently is handled. In general, from a search point of view, if we can index the individual mobile pages, the desktop pages as well, or like whatever you have available there, that's perfectly fine. If people from your pages end up going to the app, that's also perfectly fine from our point of view.
So the way you are talking is about maybe a top banner on the site page. And maybe if we redirecting them, like force them to redirect, will that be maybe bad for SEO or site?
I think probably that would be OK. I mean, there are 2 things I have in the back of my head, which might be something to watch out for. One, since Googlebot also uses an Android user agent, you need to make sure that you don't redirect Googlebot to the App Store or the app, because we won't install the app. So that's one thing. The other thing is with regards to specifically the metrics around Core Web Vitals. If you always redirect mobile users directly to the app, then you won't have a lot of data for the Core Web Vitals. And depending on your site, maybe that doesn't bother you. Maybe that's fine. But it's also kind of something to keep in mind there. But I think, as far as I have it in my head, at the moment, there is nothing kind of like negative from an SEO point of view if you redirect users to an app. I think from a usability point of view, making it optional is a lot nicer. But ultimately, that's between you and your users.
Yeah, so good to know. Maybe we can start by maybe doing some tests, doing A/B test to test. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I think we also still have some documentation about this because it used to be a part of search with regards to app indexing. And I'm pretty sure we have some documentation either on our side or on the Firebase app indexing side with regards to that specific kind of configuration.
Great, great. I will check it out later.
Cool.
So the second question is about region-specific subdomains. Like if we want to build region-specific subdomains and use half-line to indicate our language, does the page content need to be exactly the same
No.
except currency?
No, it's like you can change these pages. I've also seen situations where you swap out the product name because maybe you have a different brand name in different countries. That's all fine. Essentially, it should be equivalent. That if a user was searching for a specific kind of product, that they find kind of like the equivalent kind of products on those pages.
Yeah. Yeah, so we just worried that we build different orthograms for different subdomains, country sites, and we're afraid that maybe different orthogram make like some recommendation models and maybe some product listing maybe are different. So
that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. It's like also the availability of individual products varies across countries, and if the category page is the category page that a user would see in that country, that's fine, even if it's not the same as in other countries.
Okay, so how does Google like measure the similarity of pages?
I think we don't. I think we basically use the hreflang to understand which of these URLs are equivalent from your point of view, and we'll swap those out.
Oh, okay, so not from the content point of view, maybe some similar content?
No, we would only do that for things like the rel canonical to understand what the canonical URL is. But for hreflang, I think it's impossible for us to kind of understand that this specific content is equivalent for another country or another language. Like there's so many local differences that are always possible.
Okay, great to know. The last question is about backlinks. So we are a big e-commerce site, and there are like millions of backlinks, and we have like a standard procedure to check some spam backlinks every month or maybe several months, and we just noticed that the upper limit of the Google disavow list is only 2 MB, and if I just wonder if our file has exceeded the limit, then how to deal with those spam backlinks?
Yeah. Usually, I would recommend, on the one hand, trying to use the domain directive as much as possible. That saves you kind of multiple entries from the same site. And also not to focus too much on trying to clean up all links, because that's always impossible. I would really focus on using the disavow for links where when you look at them, you think if someone from the web spam team were to look at this, they would be 100% certain that you bought them or that there was some kind of exchange happening here. But for all of these kind of random links that a website gets, and even from spammy pages or copy pages or random forum posts, those are not things that you need to put in the disavow file.
So currently, most spam links we found are like Korean porn sites. It's very clear that they are spam. They targeted to our site to our search pages, which is super weird for me.
Yeah. I mean, what they might be doing, I don't know if this is the case in your situation, but I've seen that before, is that they target search results pages with a specific query that includes things like a phone number or a URL in the hope that that phone number shows up in the search results. And if you just no index your search results pages or search results pages that have maybe a longer query in them, something like that, then they automatically don't get indexed.
Oh, that's good to hear. We will definitely try this method.
Cool.
Okay, great. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Cool. Let me run through some of the submitted questions, and I'll get back to those of you with your raised hands as well. Let's see. The first one I have here is, do I need to mark up content on my page with HTML semantic elements, for example, footer? Does it help somehow to understand the content for Google? I think we talked about this very briefly with headings, but it's essentially similar here. For some types of elements, it does give us a little bit more context about the content of your page. But things like footer don't really give us that much more information. So some amount of semantic HTML definitely makes sense for SEO. It definitely makes sense for usability and for compatibility across different browser types, all of that as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like important for SEO. Should we expect a drop in traffic if we remove AMP? So I assume this is a setup where you have kind of traditional HTML pages and AMP pages, and you link between them. I think there are three things that kind of come together when you remove AMP pages like this. On the one hand, there are some search features that are limited to AMP-only pages. I don't think there are any at the moment. I would have to double check. But I don't think there are any search features at the moment that are only available to AMP pages. So from that point of view, like, you wouldn't be losing anything there. The other thing is that AMP pages tend to be very fast, or it's easier to make very fast AMP pages. And since we do use speed and kind of the page experience as a ranking factor, it is something where if you have a lot of very fast pages in AMP and you switch over to slower pages that are non-AMP, then you might see an effect there. You can, of course, make very fast pages that are not AMP as well. Like, it's not limited to AMP. So that's something where I would double check to see how kind of things with regards to speed apply there. And I think the third one is there's occasionally this assumption that AMP pages somehow rank better, and that's not the case. AMP is not a ranking factor, so it shouldn't be something where you would see a change in ranking just because you have AMP pages or you don't have AMP pages. So all of those things kind of together, if you can make sure that your normal pages are fast and equivalent, and you have all of the structured data that you need in those normal pages, then probably you can turn off AMP, and it'll be essentially very similar. What you'll probably see is kind of a transitional period of kind of some AMP pages still being in the AMP cache and kind of taking a while to bubble out. But in general, it's possible to turn these off. We have a Help Center article about this kind of turning off of AMP pages. So I would double check that as well. Yeah. I think that's pretty much it with regards to AMP. With regards to crawling, you probably already see that AMP pages tend to be crawled a little bit more often because we refresh the cache through crawling as well. So if you don't have those extra AMP pages, then our crawling will be focused more on the rest of your site. So you might see a rise in kind of crawl activity on the kind of traditional pages that you have there. Let's see. I think we talked about the different states. I have a site that has a lot of weird spam links pointing to it. I added thousands of these to the disavow file. But I'm concerned I might have taken out some good links in the process. There was never a manual action, so I'm wondering whether it would be wise to test this by removing the disavow file with the option of adding it again later if things didn't improve. I mean, you can always test this kind of thing. So my assumption is that for most websites, you don't need to use a disavow file, and it's easy to get things wrong. But that doesn't mean that all websites should never use it. So from that point of view, it's it's hard for me to say that you'll see an improvement or kind of a sort of a problem with regards to that. But I would almost take this as something where you go incrementally through your disavow file and maybe split it up into parts, and then incrementally take out individual parts and see how that works for you. And that way, you kind of remove some of the risk by just kind of like blindly switching things on and off to kind of figuring out which parts of the file actually don't cause any problems. And maybe in the end, you'll figure out that, well, you didn't need this at all. But it kind of takes away that risk of, like, if I turn this off completely, will everything blow up? Which probably it won't. Probably it'll be fine. In recent months, I noticed Google serving knowledge panels for certain name searches very consistently in mobile and not at all on desktop for the same query. These examples, the examples where I'm seeing this pattern are generally business executives who are notable but don't have a Wikipedia page. Is it possible to understand why a knowledge panel is considered appropriate to serve to mobile users but not to desktop users in this situation? And is Wikipedia the critical factor for Google when deciding whether or not to show a knowledge panel? So I'm not aware of specific things that we do differently on mobile and desktop with regards to knowledge panel, but it's very common across the different search features that depending on the device type, on the kind of the real estate that we have available, we'll turn some features on and some features off to try to make sure that we're showing something that is useful to the user based on the query that they were using. So from that point of view, I wouldn't be surprised if you see different knowledge panels on desktop and mobile. But I also don't think there is any one particular factor that we'd say, this is why you're seeing this knowledge panel at this time and not at another time. Sometimes with regards to these kind of queries, where you are seeing kind of this change, it might be that it's like just on the border of let's show a knowledge panel or not, and then maybe the device type just kind of like turns it over and like says yes or no in the end. But that's something where I don't think there's like one specific factor that is involved with showing these or not showing these. We do use a variety of different sources for knowledge panels, and some of that you'll see in the knowledge panel directly. So that's kind of one thing you can kind of follow up a little bit. Another tip that I would give with regards to these kind of things is there's some people externally from Google who've spent a lot of time kind of looking into the knowledge panels and like how things are shown when Google picks things up. And some of these write about the things that they found and kind of have their own tools to try that out. I would try to look up some of those folks and get in touch with them and kind of like look at the details that they figured out. Jason Bernard is one of the people I know who does this really well. He's posting on Twitter all the time around knowledge panels. And maybe that gives you some ideas as well of what you could be looking at there. Then synonyms, how automated is it? Is there a human component? For example, automobile rentals brings up rental cars. That makes a lot of sense. I'm seeing situations where searches for generic keyword phrase, moving truck or rental truck, shows a brand budget truck rental instead of a synonym or no alteration at all. It's similar to a person searching for inkjet printer and then getting HP's knowledge panel in addition. So as far as I know, the whole synonym system is completely automated. It's not something where someone is manually working on a spreadsheet of synonyms and kind of like saying, well, this is the same as this, because that would never really work out. We see, I think, somewhere along the lines of 10 to 15% of queries completely new every day. So it wouldn't be possible for anyone to kind of like keep up with this all the time. There is a video from one of the events that we did, I think like 2 or 3 years back now, where Paul Haar, one of the engineers that works on the system, kind of presented some of the situations that we ran across with regards to synonyms, where we try to figure out like what are the synonyms here and some of the cases where we got things completely wrong. And I thought that was really interesting to look at there. And if you're interested around synonyms and how Google figures that out, I would definitely check that out. With regards to that kind of generic switch between moving truck and budget truck rental, that's something where most likely we also learned that automatically. And some of these cases we get well, where things kind of work out, or essentially kind of makes sense. And some of these we get wrong. If you see cases where we get synonyms wrong, then definitely send us feedback in the search results so that we can try to figure out what we can do to improve that. My client has business in several locations in India. In that case, what would be the best method to include local business schema? So this is similar to, I think, the question we had earlier about different states. If you have different landing pages for those different locations, you can put the individual local business schema on those individual pages with the address, phone numbers, opening hours, all of that additional information. So that's kind of the approach I would take there. I have 15 to 20 FAQs on my web page. Should I include all the questions in the FAQ schema or just the questions that I consider important? When it comes to structured data, we want to see the structured data visible on the page, but not all visible content has to be marked up with structured data. So if you have individual pieces of content on your page that you want to give structured data for, then go ahead and do that. You don't have to do that for every piece of content on your page. So if you have 20 FAQs and you mark up 5 of them, that's totally up to you. You can even use the data no snippet to kind of like completely block some of these other items from appearing in a snippet if that's something that you'd like to do. Can Google use content that is initially hidden within accordions, tabs, and drop-down elements to use for featured snippets? And people also ask. The design elements are great for user experience. However, they have the same probability of being used by Google for rich snippets compared to standard paragraph within an article that is always visible without requiring the user to click anything. So for structured data type things like FAQs, we do require that the information is visible on the page. And specifically for FAQs, we require that the question is visible. The answer can be kind of within this kind of accordion setup. For the elements that you mentioned, the featured snippets, and people also ask, I don't know if that really applies there. So featured snippets are essentially just normal snippets of a page that we would show. And they can sometimes include things that are behind an accordion. My understanding is that we try not to show much kind of like initially not visible content in snippets in general. But it can happen. If we think that this is particularly relevant for a page, that it makes sense to give the user additional context so that they know why your page is a good match for what they're looking for, then maybe it does make sense for us to show some of that. With regards to people also ask, I don't know. My assumption is it's probably also similar. But my assumption is also people also ask is probably more based on what people actually search for rather than content that is visible directly on your pages. OK, wow, we still have a bunch of questions left, but also more and more hands going up. So maybe I'll just go and switch over to you all here live. Let's see, Clement, I think you're first.
Hello, John. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm working for a French e-commerce website. We are selling goods for sexual wellness, like massage oils, gifts for couples, or sex toys. That's why we are classified as an adult website by Google. 1 year ago, we were ranking first on the main queries of the market, like the query sex toy. And our competitors were second, third, fourth, etc. Today, there are no more adult websites on these queries. there are only general websites like Amazon. I wonder if it's something that Google wants, that e-commerce websites specialized in selling sex toys are not ranking on sex toy query, or if it's a mistake. And I wonder if there is not a bug or something wrong with a safe search update, because for example, when I'm searching sex toy with my Google account with safe search deactivated, and my Google account is more than 18 years old, I still don't see the adult websites ranking. There are only general websites like Amazon. I don't know if it's normal or not.
I don't know. If you can maybe copy some of the queries that you're using and some of the sites that you expect to find there into the chat, I can take that out and forward that to the Safe Search team to look at. I mean, it's always possible that there's something that we could be doing better there, but I don't know offhand if they would consider this to be acceptable, or if this is problematic or borderline, or how they would see this particular situation. But if you can maybe include some of the queries that you're using and some of the sites that you expect to find for those queries, that would be very useful for me.
OK, thank you.
Sure.
I put you in the chat.
Yes,
thank you.
Exactly. Cool. Robin.
Yes, hi, John. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So I have a few questions about product reviews, which is my domain. So I noticed recently you made some moves in the US to promote product reviews where there were real testing instead of just comparison. Do you have any time estimates of when we could expect these upgrades to be like in markets like in French or German?
I don't know.
Okay.
Like with most things, it's something where we tend not to pre-announce them, so it's hard to kind of like say ahead of time. And for some of these updates, the team moves very fast in kind of like rolling things out globally, and for other types of updates, it's very slow. And sometimes there are also policy and legal reasons kind of that make things a little bit harder. So it's always very tricky to give an estimate.
Okay, because those were very nice upgrades, and we're looking forward to have them in Europe, I think.
OK, cool.
I'm curious, could you explain a little more in general how could Google train like an algorithm to understand where there were real testing or not? Is it machine learning, or is it also human reviewers?
For search, for these kind of general ranking updates, it's not something where we would have human reviewers in the loop, because like there's just so much content out there. We can't review it all. And a lot of times we also don't have kind of like a clear yes or no understanding where someone can go through a website and say, oh, this page is good, this page is bad. It's just not scalable. So these are all essentially algorithmic approaches that we take. And we do use a lot of machine learning. Whether we use that for this particular update, I don't know. My guess is probably also, at least to some extent. But it's like hard to say which exact technology was used for which update.
OK. And do you plan to integrate this kind of understanding of a web page into the core Google algorithm?
I mean, it's always tricky to kind of define what is a part of the core update, the core algorithm. So I don't think I'd have an answer for that.
No problem.
Because usually what happens is when we see that some algorithm is working really well, then we'll kind of like just keep using that for a longer period of time. And at some point, you could say, well, it's a part of the core algorithm, even if it's not in a file that is called core algorithm or something like that.
And so I have a small case study where basically, like, for example, a website upgraded like 20 comparison articles, 2 comparison articles with testing. And like you can clearly see, like on the article, there are the website bots, the stuff tested for a few time. And so it was like 1 year ago. And unfortunately, like it's been 1 year, and there hasn't been any noticeable positive evolution for these specific articles. So it's just that because of that's not been integrated into the algorithm yet, I'm guessing.
I don't know.
It's weird.
Is it the case that they have some articles that are good and some articles that are kind of like old style? Or
yeah.
Yeah, I could imagine that kind of scenario throwing things off.
Okay.
Because for some kinds of understanding of a website, we do look at the bigger picture. And
Okay.
sometimes that bigger picture goes so far as kind of like the website overall.
Okay.
And if we have this mixed set of like, these are really good and these are kind of OK or not that good, then kind of what averages out is really hard to estimate.
Oh, okay. I understand. Okay. And so long-term quality should win, of course. But do you have any tips on what can websites do, like short-term, to do? Because long-term you can work on upgrading this stuff, but short-term.
Short-term, I don't know. It's always tricky because there's like some things that move very quickly in search and some things that take a longer period of time. What I would always recommend for sites in general is to make sure that they're not purely kind of like only focused on search. To make sure that they have a diverse set of traffic to the website. And usually what you'll see is also that if you significantly improve the quality of a website overall, you'll also see better traffic from social media and kind of like the different other channels that you use to drive traffic. And that usually kind of that mix of different channels makes it a lot more stable on the one hand, but also means that if you make bigger changes, you'll see some of these channels reacting faster, some of them taking a little bit longer to kind of like update on that. So that's kind of like almost like saying, well, you shouldn't use search for these kind of fast changes. But I think that's kind of the reality. As a business, you try to cater to a wide variety of audiences.
Sure. That's all for me. Thanks.
Cool. All right, Akash.
Hi, John. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
John, my question is related to two coverage issues. One is crawled currently and not indexed, and one is discovered currently, not indexed. And in both the cases, the pages are not indexed. This is my main problem. However, we had recently submitted, say around 150 URLs, and out of which many of them has got already indexed, but few pages are not getting indexed in Google SRP or the Google SERP. I know that Google does not index or like the whole content. It takes time and all those things. But the thing is that it doesn't give the search bar doesn't give much more information. It just shows their last scroll or something, an A, like not applicable or something like that, because the pages are created, because the rest of the pages and these pages are almost same. They do bring a lot of values. What should I do when there is very much less information, or what should I do to make these pages at least faster, right? Like linking from the home pages or linking from the pages which are already ranking for some of the queries of my particular website. Will that help me getting those pages rank a bit faster, like something like that, or it could be like bringing more backlinks and so.
I think all of those things kind of help. And it sounds like you're on the right track and you know a little bit like what to expect. And from our point of view, it's really the case that we don't index all content on all websites. And that's kind of expected from our side. So if you're seeing a big part of your content already being indexed, I think you're on the right approach. But it doesn't mean that like everything is perfect. And things like internal linking, making sure that the overall quality of the website is really good, those help a lot. Sometimes it might also make sense to look at the website overall and say, well, I have submitted 500 pages in my sitemap file or wherever, and 200 of them are being indexed. Like, what is the value of those 300 pages that are not getting an index? And is there something that maybe I can do to go from having 500 random pages on a website, maybe reducing down to maybe 300 really good pages on a website, to kind of like concentrate the value into fewer pages so that at least as those fewer pages get indexed, you get a lot of the value of those pages back, which could be that they rank for different keywords, or they work for the users that you care about most, kind of as a way of prioritizing on your side before you hand everything over to Google to do. So that would kind of be my approach there. On the one hand, kind of making sure that you have everything lined up properly with internal linking and the overall website quality. And on the other hand, if you're seeing that lots of your pages are not being indexed, trying to find a way to make it clear to Google which pages they should be prioritizing, which could be like removing some pages that you don't really care about or that are not critical for your site.
John, is it like, let's say there are few keywords which has a very high search volume. Let's say a shoes keyword. A shoes keyword will probably have a very high search volume rather than a shoot at my place or near the home. A particular query has maybe 10 search volume or low. Is it something like getting an internal link from a page which has a very, has a high search volume, which is again ranking, rather than a page which has a low search volume? Again, it's ranking good, but why should I, at least build internal links from those pages? Is it something like, the high keyword search volume pages, if you interlink the other pages of your website, that is something would be like more valuable or something like that?
I don't think we would look at the search volume at all for things like that. So it's really a matter of understanding the importance of pages within your website, and that's not tied to how many people search for those pages.
Okay. One last question.
Sure.
Let's say if for a particular product, the manufacturer is been publishing that particular product to 10 to 20 different sites. So the overall product description or the product guidelines, or the product value became same, right? The images could be the same. The product information could be the same on multiple pages or the multiple vendors to which they are selling. Uh, is it still okay to write something extra, kind of, something more unique on my website, just to make sure that I have something extra about that particular product which rest other people does have, but they are just copy pasting the overall description from the manufacturer, whereas the products are like just like, shoes or like t-shirts. It's not something the medical products which, I am just bluffing the content, but making sure that writing more unique or more addition to the SERP might be helpful to the users as well. So would that help me to rank better, just to add a more value in the SERP?
I think if you can add more value on top of kind of generic manufacturer information, that's always a good thing. What I would not do is just add kind of like fluff to these pages and just like, I don't know, a copy of Wikipedia article about the product category and put that on every page. It should really be something that adds value to the user. So if they go there, they see, well, the generic information is on lots of different sites, but this website here has some additional information which helps me as someone who might be interested in this product. So really kind of unique and valuable information, adding that is a great idea. Just filling extra text on a page, I would not do that.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure. Cool. All right. We still have some hands raised. I can go over a little bit, but let me pause the recording here. Thank you all for sticking around. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's like, thanks for watching to the end. If you'd like to join one of these yourself, like, feel free to watch out for these links. We post them in the community section of our channel. Usually they're around weekly. On Fridays, often, we alternate between morning and evening times, my time, which kind of maps to different locations in the world. Anyway, thank you all for submitting so many questions. And thank you for asking questions here live. And hopefully, we'll see some of you again in one of the future episodes. Bye, everyone.